History is full of amazing stories and memorable people.
But we don't care about them.
No hits, deep tracks only.
Some of the most influential people in the world have been completely overlooked or just plain forgotten.
We're digging deep into the history books to bring you their stories.
And maybe some laughs along the way.
This is History's B-Side.
Today's B-Sider is America's first black female millionaire.
So I wanted to start off today's episode by just having a short discussion, I guess, about opportunity in general. I think our topic for today, kind of embodies the idea of, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, being a self-made businesswoman. And I think there's a lot of misconstrued ideas and misuses of those terms in our society. But I guess I wanted to start off just to relate a little bit by discussing the opportunities we've shared and that we have, because, I don't know that you or I can really say in our positions of privilege that we've been or would ever be self-made in a way. But I know both of us have always kind of expressed a desire to, go out on our own and start our own business, which is one of the reasons behind this podcast.
I mean, I wouldn't describe myself as self-made by any stretch of the term. I think the idea of starting your own business and making it yours and doing what you want with it is enticing and exciting, but I am by no means a risk taker in that sense. I think I've always been choosing the most cautious route that I possibly can whenever I make career moves or anything like that, picking colleges, that kind of thing.
I mean, I kind of agree with that. I think a lot of people look at me and some of my, professional decisions and decisions in general as risky, but I definitely spend a fair amount of time weighing my options. And that's one of the things that kind of leads to my indecision.
But I think you've definitely taken some steps out of your comfort zone in ways that even I can't relate to. Like when you uprooted your life to move to Portland to pursue your sommelier certifications, like that's something that I've never attempted to do, more or less. I wouldn't say wanted to, because I think if there was a good opportunity that caused me to move for it, I think I would at least strongly consider it. I can't say I would actually do it. I mean, like I said, I'm not much a risk taker. Even when it came to deciding what college I went to, like I looked at a couple different schools, and sure, some of them might have been maybe a better opportunity for socializing or playing baseball in college or whatever. But the ended up deciding factor for me was I went to Youngstown State because it would be a decent school and a heck of a lot more affordable. So I wanted to set myself up to, not have debt.
I mean, it was kind of the same for me. When I was considering going away to music school, I kind of looked at, the fact that I was 18. I wasn't really confident in what I wanted to do. And I was looking at all these schools that cost $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And at the time, YSU just made much more sense in terms of being cautious financially and not making, huge leaps that I would later regret. But I do think on some level, I wish I would have, went out on a limb more. And I think that's something in general that, outside of college has kept me from, pursuing some things that maybe I would have otherwise, was the financial factor. I mean, starting a business is never easy. And it takes, I think, a lot of guts and a lot of bravery and a lot of willingness to kind of throw yourself to the wind to make that step. It's not, especially financially, an easy thing to do.
I think you and I have had those conversations before where we're like, oh, it'd be really cool if we started a business to do this or whatever. But yeah, that's going to cost X amount of dollars for us to even get it going, and then we're not going to make a profit for X number of years,
right.
And then we're not going to be able to pay ourselves. And for me, like the bridge to getting into entrepreneurship is just the fact that I'm afraid to take that much time without knowing that I'm going to get a paycheck, and then
Yeah.
I'm not providing for myself or for my family.
Sure.
And I have a hard time necessarily taking that risk because I always think about well, if I only had this, or if we were able to do this, or if I could guarantee this. I mean, in some ways, I admire my sister-in-law, Bianca, who is going to love that I'm mentioning her in this because hopefully she's playing our podcast in her salon right now. But she was someone who had this background of being a hairstylist and beautician. She went to school for all this stuff. And then her and her husband decided that what if we just owned our own salon and I could continue to do this and make a little more money as the business owner. And they actually, took that leap. And it helps that they have some skill sets, like her husband is able to completely remodel and build the salon the way that they want it to make it profitable. But they actually took that step to become business owners and to put themselves in a position where they can be successful in more ways than just doing the job that they know how to do regularly.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of people look at entrepreneurship and they see this very stereotypical, like in these days, I guess it would be the tech entrepreneur where you need this big idea and all of these skills and a new invention or something like that. But and in some cases you do need that, but I think in most cases you can start a small business in any different arena as long as you have some expertise in the business. Like Bianca is a hairstylist. She knows how to do it. She knows the industry. She can see trends and things like that. But I think the two things that really set apart people who do become entrepreneurs or attempt to and are successful at it are a simple willingness to start, just that bravery to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also the ability to work hard enough and be tenacious enough to keep overcoming obstacles. I mean, any time that I've considered trying to start a business or looking into it, I found that it's very easy to get overwhelmed with the sheer amount of things you need to teach yourself how to do, whether it's applying for certain permits or being up to code on government regulations, asking for investments, knowing how to write a business plan. There's so many different things that in bits and pieces, if you break them down to like the smallest possible task, aren't impossible to do. But
yeah,
you have to have a certain amount of belief in yourself and, like I said, tenacity to consistently get past those obstacles.
and it's the people willing to put in the work for it.
Right, exactly.
And we've even about ourselves, we talk about, oh, this would be a great business idea, or we should try to do this. I feel like almost just hypothetically, because we're not really ones to commit that much effort or money or risk into it. But even in the sense of just starting this podcast, not that this is any lucrative business opportunity. We both have our own ways to provide for our needs beyond having a podcast. I don't think we're relying on this as our main income, but it's a very low barrier to entry thing that we said, hey, we could do this. And now that we're in the middle of it, we're starting to realize how much work it actually takes to keep up something as simple as this. I mean, we put a couple hours a week into research and recording and editing, and imagine if this was a real business, it would be a full-time job.
Right, exactly. I mean, when we started, I was myself overwhelmed just with how to record and what software to use to get our stuff out there and all of that. So the idea of starting like a social media or a tech company like Facebook or Apple and the amount of work needed to do that just boggles my mind.
Not that we're comparing our podcast to, dropping out of college and founding Facebook or whatever, but we work just as hard.
We do. I mean, true, it's not comparable in its complexity, but I think we keep talking about these two main ingredients, the willingness to start and the perseverance to get through obstacles. I think they're the same. They're two completely different scales between, a podcast and a salon and Facebook, but the general principle, I think, is pretty similar. And I kind of think, those two things were core parts of our topic for today, CJ Walker's, mindset and qualities that made her a successful businesswoman, which makes this a good place to begin discussing her life. So she was born Sarah Breedlove in December of 1867 near the town of Delta, Louisiana, which is about 150 miles by car north of Baton Rouge.
And 150 miles by car is longer or shorter than 150 miles on foot or by bike or...
I mean, I didn't go through Google Maps and test out every single route, but I was trying to sit there with like a ruler and figure out the direct, as you know, as the crow flies mileage, but it just seemed easier to type the two cities into Google Maps and give a best guess.
Fair. I'll just take my crow.
She was born to Owen and Minerva Breedlove, who were Louisiana sharecroppers born into slavery, and she had 5 siblings: her older sister Lavinia and brothers Alexander, James, Solomon, and Owen Jr.
She was the youngest of the 5? 6?
Yeah, she was the youngest, and in fact, all of her older siblings were enslaved by a man by the name of Robert W. Birney on his Madison Parish plantation, and she was the first child in her family to be born into freedom after the Emancipation Proclamation, which took effect January 1st, 1863, so about 4 years before her birth.
Lucky timing for her.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far to say it was lucky timing. I mean, we're still talking about Reconstruction America, so definitely not an opportune time to be born.
I know. We're about to talk about how horrible her life was growing up, so we're going to look for one moment of optimism where we can.
Yeah, but I mean, when you think about it today, we talk about first-generation college students or first-generation graduate students, but Sarah Breedlove was, you know, a first-generation free person. All of her previous ancestors were slaves.
First generation human and not property.
Right. So just short of 5 years after her birth, her mother passes away from cholera. And though he remarried, her father ended up passing away a year later.
Jeez.
After being orphaned at the age of 7, Sarah moved to Vicksburg, Mississippi at the age of 10, where she lived with her sister Lavinia and brother-in-law Jesse Powell, and worked as a domestic servant. Being left an orphan so young and only having 3 months of formal education from Sunday school literacy lessons, she basically began her life with little to no opportunity. In 1882, a 14-year-old Sarah married Moses McWilliams to escape her abusive brother-in-law Jesse.
She's 14. I mean, a couple episodes ago we talked about Jing Shi, who was a prostitute at age 13, and we're like, yeah, that was the times. I mean, hopefully, because this is a marriage, it was consensual, but that time period, it's kind of hard to necessarily say that.
Yeah.
Still young.
Super young, especially for today's standards. Sarah and Moses ended up having a daughter, Lelia, in 1885. Unfortunately, though, she was left a widow and a single mother 2 years later upon Moses' passing in 1887.
Not a great childhood. And she's still a child. Like, she's 19, 20. Like,
right. I mean, Jesus, at 14, let alone 19, I was a lunatic. There's no way I would be able to deal with this. Like, I mean, this is an intense amount of trauma for such a young person.
We might have been 14 when we met each other.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been freshman year, so 2007. I was 15. Definitely a lot of negative experiences and a lot of trauma for somebody so young, and to be packed into, you know, such a close period of years. And it certainly had an effect on her for the rest of her life.
Right.
In 1888, after her husband's death, Sarah and her daughter moved to St. Louis, where 3 of her 4 brothers lived. She ended up finding work as a laundress, where she earned barely $1 a day. So this, to put it into today's money, basically comes out to about $29. So there's a couple different ways you can find inflation information. The Bureau of Labor Statistics only reaches back to 1913, which this is obviously before, but it's the most comprehensive and reliable source. So there's other sources that have different standards of research. They're still fairly reliable, but some calculations come out to about $29. Some came to about 26. The BLS calculation came to 26 in 1913. So given the superior rigor used by the BLS, it's hard to know exactly what it would have been, but it's a safe bet that this was less than $30 a day for her in 1888.
In today's money.
Right. In today's money.
It's not very much.
Nope. I mean, this would put her well below the poverty line then and today. Definitely not a lot for one person, let alone somebody taking care of a child. I mean, even assuming she works 7 days a week, 365 days a year, this only comes out to about $10,000 a year. So well below the poverty line. Despite this measly income, though, Sarah was determined to earn enough to afford a formal education for her daughter. During this time, she began singing at the St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church, and she yearned for the educated life she saw in her peers and the women at her church.
I'm kind of noticing in this actually what a big role the church plays in her, I guess, youth. I mean, that was her only real sense of any kind of education when she was younger. And it wasn't much, but she had a little bit of literacy classes in her Sunday school. And now this is where she's starting to socialize and see the role that education played in, I guess, sort of her peers. It's interesting because, I mean, even today you still see the church being a big part of Black culture and the Black community. But it's got to be even more so at this time. Like, they didn't have as many opportunities for education or economic benefit or anything like that. And the church is really just kind of the center of, I guess, their opportunity.
Well, yeah. I mean, the church at this time was kind of a center of community and community involvement and community assistance. You know, they supplied food programs for children. They supplied education. They supplied economic assistance programs, job programs. So the church really was kind of a pillar of the Black community at this time. And so it makes sense that she would look around. I mean, this was probably her most widespread social community, and look around at her peers and be yearning for the life they led.
You also mentioned how important education was for her and, in effect, for her daughter. Was she ever actually able to afford this formal education for Lilia?
I believe so. Lilia did attend Knoxville College in Tennessee just before going into business with her mother. So yes, her daughter was able to have the education that she hoped for her. I think this might be a good place to take a break before we dive into Madam C.J. Walker's career and the building of her company. So we'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Matt, you like coffee, right?
I love coffee.
Would you ever want to buy me a coffee?
Anytime, Phil. Just say the word.
You know, our dedicated listeners could also buy me a coffee.
Could they buy me a coffee as well?
They could buy you a coffee.
This sounds fantastic.
We set up this service called Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
And people can buy us a coffee?
Yeah. It's really just a way for people to support the show if they enjoy the show. And if they're listening to the show, we sure hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, otherwise you're just, wasting your time.
At buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside, there's 3 ways that our listeners can interact with the show. Number 1, you can just donate to the show by clicking Buy Them a Coffee.
2, you can join as a member for $10 a month or $100 a year. Being a member gains you some pretty cool perks. You get access to our monthly bonus episode, History's B-Side Battles, access to our future episode queue, a name shout out on a future episode. We'll also send you a handwritten thank you postcard and sticker set, and more perks will be announced as we continue on.
There's also some different extras that people can get on our Buy Me a Coffee website. Things like choosing the topic for a future episode. If there's a lesser known person in history that you have an interest in, let us know and we'll do an episode all about them. You can also buy sets of custom postcards, sticker sets, and future merchandise that we add on there as well. Or you can draft your own advertisement script and we will promote whatever you want in a segment like this.
The website again is buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
Matt?
Yeah.
You owe me a coffee.
Oh. Do I get a coffee too?
You're buying.
All right. All right, welcome back. When we left off, we found Sarah, kind of struggling with various pretty low-paying odd jobs, but also in a social circle that allowed her to, see the benefits of education and the opportunity that came with it, and kind of yearning for a better lifestyle for her family. In our second part, we're going to kind of go through how she formed her business and, the different paths and obstacles that she came upon, to kind of give you an introduction to the industry she decided to go into. At the time that she was alive, it was pretty common for black women, including Sarah, to suffer from severe dandruff, baldness, and other scalp ailments due to skin disorders and the use of harsh products available to clean hair. There were other contributing factors just due to poor diet, illness. I mean, this was the turn of the century, so they didn't have indoor plumbing, no central heating, no electricity, so people bathed less frequently, and there was just overall across the population less hygiene, and that led to I mean, there's not really a polite way to say it, right?
It was the times.
As was the times. And that led to pretty unhealthy hair, and Sarah herself started noticing that her hair was falling out and was really unhealthy. And she initially learned about hair care from her brothers, who, as I previously mentioned, worked as barbers in St. Louis. But around the time of the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, which is the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904, she began working as a commission agent selling hair products for a woman named Annie Malone, who was an African hair care entrepreneur and millionaire owner of the Poro Company. So Annie Malone had this hair care company, and there's a lot of differing accounts of who was the first African-American female millionaire, and Annie Malone would be a good competitor with C.J. Walker. The thing was, C.J. Walker just had a better record and was better able to demonstrate her wealth. So, I mean, it's possible and maybe likely that Annie Malone was the first one to that goal, because she had a very successful company.
Is it known what she, I guess, accumulated? Like, was she actually a millionaire, Annie Malone?
She was a millionaire during her lifetime. When that happened isn't well documented. But
okay.
It was confirmed that she was a millionaire during her.
So it's possible that our Madam C.J. Walker was just the better known of the two, may not have actually been the first millionaire, first black female millionaire.
Yes, and that is, I'm glad you brought that up, because that theme, C.J. Walker being the better known at something than Annie Malone, doesn't just apply to their wealth. It applied to their products as well.
So we'll do a History Seaside podcast about Annie Malone and how she was the first black female millionaire.
In fact, yeah, when I was looking this up and reading about C.J. Walker, there were a lot of articles like that. Like, C.J. Walker's great, but Annie Malone...
That's like exactly the person we're trying to find for these episodes.
Yeah.
But I'm sure most people couldn't tell you anything about C.J. Walker either, unless you mentioned that Netflix show and people started watching that before they heard this episode.
Yeah. So Sarah starts working for Annie Malone as a sales associate, essentially, a sales agent, going door to door and selling her hair products. And this is where things get a little sticky, because it's during the time she worked for Malone that Sarah begins to use her knowledge to develop her own product line. So she's working for Annie, but at the same time developing a product that would compete with Annie's. And it's like, today I just imagine, I myself, working for fairly humble companies, have already signed, non-competes or invention contracts where my ideas are the property of the company. This kind of stuff really it wasn't standard back then, especially for, small businesses. But this kind of made Malone and Sarah rivals. And at one point, Malone did accuse Sarah of stealing her formula, which it wasn't a proprietary thing. It was basically a 100-year-old mixture of petroleum jelly and sulfur. And Sarah claimed that she only had a chemist analyze it to form the basis of hers. So
that's kind of going out of your way, though, to have a chemist study the product
a little
to give you an idea of how to make your own. I mean, I feel like that's baseline stealing her product.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I kind of struggled with this, and I tried to look up other opinions. The one interesting comparison that I don't know if I totally agree with is Steve Jobs and the computer. He didn't invent the computer, He just made it better.
That's all Apple products in general. Apple doesn't come up
Right.
with anything new. They just take whatever Samsung did before and then say, look at this awesome new feature, and it's on Apple, so you're going to buy it.
Yeah. So, I mean, she technically did, in a way, steal it. I can't really speak as to legally whether or not Annie Malone would have had a lawsuit on her hands, but
I mean, did she face any consequences for having used a very similar formula?
not legally. I mean, the only thing that really came of it is that Annie Malone. So, as I'm about to get into, CJ Walker, or Sarah at this point, moved to Denver and started her business there. And at one point, Annie Malone actually took an ad out in a newspaper in Denver saying, like, people are starting to replicate our product and claim that it made it. And she even said, like, that they're even claiming that it made their hair the way it is, and it was actually our product. Speaking directly of Sarah, it was our product that fixed her hair. So
That's petty.
I mean, that was the biggest consequence that came of it. You know, the Netflix show that I mentioned, as I said, it takes a lot of kind of dramatic liberties, and one of them is way over intensifying the duel between Annie, who in the show is called Addie, and CJ Walker. I mean, it's the whole point of the show is their rivalry back and forth. And it really, I mean, historical sources don't really back that up. They weren't diehard rivals till the end. It was just a sticky moment, and then both of them kind of moved on.
Interesting.
In January 1906, Sarah married a man named Charles Joseph Walker, and it was from him that she would get the name CJ Walker. Her daughter, Lelia, also adopted her stepfather's surname and became known as Alelia Walker.
Is there a reason that she went by her husband's name? Like, obviously, at the time, women didn't have as prominent of a standing in social culture. So would her using her husband's name have greatly benefited her business? Obviously, you need a good product and business acumen, but having a man's name behind it, would that have benefited her? Sort of, I guess, in the same way that, like, J.K. Rowling uses the name J.K. Rowling instead of her actual name because she thought that if people perceived it as a man writing the Harry Potter books, that they would do better.
I mean, that's possible. I didn't read anything specifically pointing out the gender issue, but the main reason she took that name and ran with it was for marketing. It was to market her business because she believed that CJ Walker was a more sellable name than Sarah Breedlove. And to that point, she also adopted the prefix Madam. So she was Madam CJ Walker after female pioneers of the French beauty industry. So they had a lot of the French beauty products began with Madam whatevers.
So I guess if she's using Madam, she's not really trying to disguise the fact that it's a woman creating the
Right.
product. That's interesting, though, that she would use her husband's name instead of her own.
Yeah, I mean, outside of it being what she thought would be a more marketable name, I couldn't find much on why that occurred. She did have, I didn't mention, actually I might have mentioned her second marriage, but in case I didn't, she had 3 marriages. The first to Lelia's father, Moses, and then her second was brief and pretty tumultuous, which took place in St. Louis. And Charles Joseph was kind of I don't want to say the best of the 3 because her first husband died, but he went into business with her. He was helping her with advertising and marketing. And I think that marriage was certainly more successful than the other 3, the other 2. So essentially she moves to Denver while she's still selling Annie's products, starts to market her own, and the business takes off. She begins selling the products door to door. And as she went, she actually taught Black women how to groom and style their hair as she went, later developing an entire system to use with her products.
Was door to door her primary sales model?
Yeah.
Okay, so she basically just, was it all her? Did she have sales agents that worked for her that also sold door to door, or did she work at all the salons?
At the beginning, it was mainly her and Charles and her daughter. But yeah, I mean, as we'll see, she expanded a lot. That was actually one of the kind of hallmarks of her business is, you know, her focus on employee opportunity or whatever you want to call it. So as the business starts to take off, she puts her daughter in charge of mail order operations, leaves her in Denver, and she and Charles start to travel throughout the southern and eastern states to expand the business. So they're still kind of going not just door to door, but to events, to public spaces, and
Right.
talking about and selling this product. Soon after that, the family closed the Denver operations in 1907 and relocated to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to open a beauty parlor.
She's still moving a lot.
Oh, it doesn't stop. She keeps going. That's the one thing that struck me is like for an entrepreneur, she keeps moving the business.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to restart your business every time you move. Like you can't really get
Yeah.
solid. I mean, obviously she was successful, so it must not have hurt her too much, but it feels like you have a hard time planting your business and growing it if you keep relocating. But
Yeah.
she made it
Well,
work.
As we tell this story, the two other places she moves and focuses on primarily are Indianapolis and then Harlem. So one of the reasons I think for this is during the migration of Black citizens into northern cities. So her family and her business are trying to find urban centers where there's a concentration of Black women who will buy this product because it was, it was marketed and intended for them. So in a way, it kind of makes sense that she would do this, but it still does to me seem like a cumbersome way
Right.
to keep moving your business like that. Once they reach Pittsburgh, PA, she establishes a college named after her daughter, Lelia College. And this is part of this passionate desire to advocate for Black women's economic independence.
And just the fact that she thought education was important.
Yeah. She starts this college to train what she called hair culturists and opened training programs in what she called the Walker system for her network of licensed sales agents who reportedly earned pretty healthy commissions compared to other career paths. I mean, as soon as she's successful enough, she starts training and recruiting women, and particularly Black women, into her company and teaching them how to succeed.
What was her Walker system? Like, how did that... Was that a sales technique or...
I honestly can't speak much to that. I mean, she was a really talented, intuitive salesperson. She was good at lining up her product with the idea of success and respect. And many might almost accuse her of pushing, at least in this day, an unfair standard of beauty in order to succeed. But her primary sales strategy was, do you want to succeed? Do you want to be successful? Do you want a better life? Make your hair look good. That was it. And yeah. So, I mean, that I can't speak to the entirety of the Walker system, but
This is the opposite of Jingxi, where the ugly ones got set free and the pretty ones become prisoners.
yeah.
So her business, was it like, obviously she would have predated this, but is this like the Mary Kay model where it's
Similar.
sort of the multi-level marketing system where her sales associates would buy these products and have to resell them?
I don't know that sales associates had to buy them first and then resell them, but that component does stretch into the fact that, later on she had meetings of all of her sales associates or sales agents, and one of the commendations or prizes that was given out, awards that was given out, was for the person who recruited the most new people.
So
there was
kind
an
of
element of
not,
that.
Not to say that she's the top of the pyramid scheme, because I mean,
Yeah.
she obviously was successful, and I'm sure we don't have a ton of records of people that would have necessarily been hurt by this, by becoming salespeople and getting into debt.
Right.
But if she did, I guess, give women who are otherwise maybe didn't have a lot of business opportunity or career opportunity
Right.
the chance to be self-employed, so to speak, and to establish their own way to earn a living, that was probably novel at the time. I mean, even when Mary Kay was established, which was, I think, in the 50s, and you still see a lot of businesses like this today with, what do we have, Lou the Row and essential oils salespeople. Like, even today, people still view this as starting your own business and becoming independent and working on your own to earn your income.
Right.
But if this was a model that she set up, 100 years ago, like, that's pretty impressive. And at the time, people had less opportunity then, or women had less opportunity then, especially Black women, than people do today.
Right. Yeah, and that was, I mean, beyond her own success, she, I mean, almost immediately turned around and started pulling her peers up with her, which I think is almost competitive with her philanthropy in terms of the things I admire about her. That when I hear entrepreneurs say or defend, I guess, the capitalist system, it's that entrepreneurs create jobs and help people that way. And that I agree with that. But she is kind of the epitome of that. You know, she isn't, you know, a factory owner who's got people working on barely living wages and terrible conditions. She immediately wanted better for her employees.
Yeah, I mean, she obviously benefited from having people working under her, and essentially their working hard makes her wealthier. But it was from a sense of inspiring them to create opportunity for themselves rather than just barely scraping by and her profiting off of that. Or maybe there were people that were barely scraping by, but it was from a different perspective than, like you said, just someone working on a factory line and her being the big wig who profits off it.
Right. So a few years later in 1910, like I said, she again relocates her business, this time to Indianapolis, which is where she eventually establishes the headquarters for the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company. So this is kind of the last place she bases her business. She initially purchases a house and a factory, but later built her own factory, hair salon, and beauty school to train sales agents. She also built a laboratory within to focus on product research. So this was kind of her big investment. This was the place where everything was made. This was the headquarters that would stick.
This is where she brings in her chemists to come study all her competitors' products for her new innovations.
And yeah, so like I said, many of her company's employees, including key management positions, were women, and particularly women of color, which was, for that day, pretty groundbreaking.
Yeah. Heck, it would be groundbreaking today in some businesses.
Yeah. So after they establish this manufacturing company in Indianapolis, they're growing, they're selling more and more. They've now got an industrial scale production facility. A few years later, her daughter, Alelia, who at this time was in charge of day-to-day operations in Pittsburgh, at the hair salon and the college, encourages her mother to establish an office and beauty salon in Harlem, noting the large population of African-American people there and it becoming kind of a center of culture. And soon after this, Alelia ended up relocating to Harlem to run operations there. Like I said, Walker had developed a specific method of grooming, which is part of her product. She would use the product, but not only that, she would teach people how to use it. And it was designed, like I said, to promote hair growth and condition the scalp through the use of her products, which included a shampoo and a pomade. And it was stated to help hair grow through the use of strenuous brushing and applying hot iron combs to the hair. So, I mean, not super unlike some of the products we know today. I'm not a female hair expert, but
I don't know anything about hair, but those sound like they would be bad for hair. But I don't know. I don't do anything with my hair.
I don't know. I mean, but I do. I mean, I see kind of like in the hot iron comb, the precursor to hair straighteners and things like that. But yeah, I mean, as I picture all of this, it almost looks painful.
We need a woman on this episode of this podcast, probably a black woman, to like actually comment on this better.
Preferably a black woman.
Two white guys that do this could answer it.
Yeah, I'm the first to admit I know nothing about this process or what it's like. So this special method she designed claimed to make lackluster and brittle hair become soft and luxuriant. Like I said, this fit into her sales technique about, having this really gorgeous head of hair, make a pathway to success for you. Like I said before, her product line had several competitors, including Annie Malone with her Poro system, and her other main competitor was a woman named Sarah Spencer Washington, who had what she called the Apex system. And, it was obviously from Annie that she derived her formula. So she wasn't the only one. She was just really good at marketing and developing a product and a brand that people knew well and that people wanted. In fact, at the height of her career in the decade between 1910 and 1920, her company ended up employing several thousand women as sales agents.
Wow.
By 1917, the company claimed to have trained almost 20,000 women, and I read somewhere that at its largest, it employed almost 40,000 people.
That's a big company.
Yeah, I mean, crazy big for literally starting from nothing, from selling stuff door to door.
I mean, were they actual employees, or were they, what do people call them today, independent consultants, or basically don't technically work for the company, but they sell their own products? So if they worked on commission, I would think that they were actual employees.
Yeah, I mean, they were actual employees. And this didn't just include the sales agents. This included the hair culturists in the salons. This included secretaries. This included product makers in the factory. But still a big operation. And this was partially due to Walker's pretty thorough understanding of the power of advertising and brand awareness. Like I said, that was kind of what set her above the other products of the day. It's not that the other products didn't work as well. They just fell behind when it came to making the brand popular.
Yeah.
She advertised heavily in primarily African-American newspapers and magazines, and these ads, coupled with her frequent travels to promote her products, led to a pretty widespread recognition of her brand. So pretty late into the game, she was still traveling around herself, along with all of her sales agents, promoting this product.
She knew her market, and she had the facial recognition to go along with the name of the product, saying, hey, it's me. This is my product. And I'm sure at this point her hair was looking pretty good, so the proof was in the pudding.
Yeah, exactly. And all of these sales agents that she had, in addition to all of this sales and grooming training, she also taught them how to budget, how to build their own businesses, and encourage them to become financially independent on their own. And this goes back to what I was saying about her immediately turning around and pulling her peers up with her. Her purpose was to build a machine that basically produced more economically independent Black women. I mean, that's what her business turned into.
That's probably almost more important than teaching them how to sell this product and how to groom. Just the basic life skill of managing a budget and being financially independent and able to sustain and support yourself. That's the thing that's missing a lot, not just in inner city kids and underprivileged, underrepresented populations where it's probably the worst, but you see that even today. Like, we don't have classes in school that teach us how to be financially responsible and how to, take care of ourselves and provide for ourselves. That's all kind of learned through experience, but most kids don't have that same opportunity growing up. And that's really impressive. I'm more impressed by her teaching people, and especially her staff and her family that grew from these types of skills, than even just building the business.
Yeah, I mean, it was a priority of hers, and her entire legacy, I think, is kind of about improving the position of Black women beyond the hair care product, beyond all of it. That was really what her passion was. And I mean, she did a lot of things that lined up with that. Inspired by the National Association of Colored Women, she ended up organizing her agents into state and local clubs. So she's got so many agents at this point, she organizes them and establishes the National Beauty Culturists and Benevolent Association of Madam C.J. Walker Agents, which is a mouthful, but...
Yeah, the NBCABAMCJWA.
MCJWA.
You don't have your membership card?
I don't. So this ends up being the predecessor for the Madam C.J. Walker Beauty Culturists Union of America. Less of a mouthful.
Still a lot.
But still a mouthful. Its first annual conference took place in Philadelphia during the summer of 1917 and had 200 attendees. So most of these attendees were sales agents from around the country that worked for her business. And it's actually believed to have been one of the first national gatherings of female entrepreneurs to discuss business and commerce. So, I mean, she's leading women and groups of women in business.
And her business is only, 12 years old? Like, that's really impressive that she grew it that large, that fast, without staying in one place, like moving her base of her company all over the country, basically. And without the internet and all these modern ways of advertising and marketing your product. Like, this is almost essentially word of mouth advertising and just being the face of the company and building up your staff to grow it for you. That's really impressive. Like, 12 years is no time at all to have a company grow like this.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think her tenacity and vision and drive pushed this to a pace that I don't think many people would be capable of. That same year, 1917, she decided to spend a little bit of her money on herself. She commissioned Vertner Tandy, who was the first licensed black architect in New York City, to design her house in Irvington-on-Hudson in New York. Named Villa Lawaro, her home cost $250,000 or $5.5 million today to build, and was intended to become a gathering place for community leaders and to inspire other African Americans to pursue their dreams. Fun fact, her house was within 5 miles of John D. Rockefeller's house. She was probably one of the only African Americans, let alone African American women in this neighborhood, to be a homeowner. And she moved into the house a year later in May of 1918. And this is where the story gets a bit bittersweet. She unfortunately doesn't end up living long enough to enjoy much of the wealth she worked to create. Now, I don't know that she would have cared that much about that. I'm sure she didn't want to have her life end so early, but her main point was to be philanthropic, and she certainly did succeed to those ends. But
she probably felt that she could have done more good if she had lived longer. Not that she would have enjoyed her wealth, but been able to help more people, influence more people, and that would have been her regret. I mean, I'm guessing.
A year after moving into her new house on May 25th, 1919, she succumbs to kidney failure and other complications from hypertension at the age of 51. At the time of her death, the year before her death, her company's sales exceeded $500,000. So definitely a great milestone. And it didn't stop growing. By the 1920s, well after her death, her company's market continued to expand to Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, Panama, and Costa Rica, partially due to her prior travels to those regions to sell the product. But I mean, it definitely just kept growing. Her daughter later became the president of what was called the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company, which continued to operate until July of 1981, and is at this point considered the most widely known and financially successful African-American owned business of the early 20th century.
Do you know why they stopped operating?
I unfortunately couldn't find any information. Every article I read just said it stopped operating in 1981. There wasn't any further information. But I mean, it lasted almost 100 years.
Yeah.
To kind of back up a little bit chronologically, we've danced around this idea of her activism and philanthropy and legacy, but I kind of want to give a little bit deeper story into that. Like I've said, she donated a lot of her money to charity, and she was known for giving away vast sums of her money. She helped raise funds for a branch of YMCA in Indianapolis' black community, herself pledging $1,000, which in today's money would be $26,000. She contributed scholarship funds to the Tuskegee Institute, which is a historically black land-grant university in Alabama. She contributed to Indianapolis's Flanner House, which is a social services program, and the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Indianapolis. So, of course, giving back a lot to the community that housed her headquarters for so many years. She also gave to educational programs and institutions, including the Mary McLeod Bethune's Daytona Education and Industrial School for Negro Girls, the Palmer Memorial Institute in North Carolina, and the Haynes Normal and Industrial Institute in Georgia, which, like I said, primarily focused on black education and empowerment. After her business moved to Harlem, New York, she ended up becoming more involved in the political sphere, delivering lectures on political, economic, and social issues at conventions sponsored by black institutions. In fact, she ended up becoming associates and, in some cases, friends with historical figures such as Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. So a pretty big figure of her time that we unfortunately don't hear about enough. During World War I, she was a leader in the Circle for Negro War Relief and advocated for a training camp for black Army officers. And in 1917, she joined the executive committee of the NAACP. Among other things, she was recognized for making the largest individual contribution to preserve Frederick Douglass's house as a historical site in Washington, D.C., and just before her death in 1919, as I said, she was on the executive committee of the NAACP, but she pledged $5,000 or in 2021 dollars, $79,000 to the NAACP's anti-lynching fund, which at the time was the largest gift from any individual that the NAACP had ever
Wow.
received. In addition to these notable gifts, she bequeathed nearly $100,000 or $1.5 million to orphanages, institutions, and individuals in her will. She also directed 2/3 of future profits of her company and her estate to charity.
Wow.
So, I mean, she basically said, whatever my stuff makes, 2/3 of it goes to charity.
That's really impressive. I mean, she's obviously a very generous person, and you kind of saw that throughout her life, but to set
Yeah.
all this up for even after she's passed is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, I think, I don't know, as good as you could hope for, gold star example of philanthropy. I mean, we look at, and I'm not one of the people that thinks Bill Gates is a bad guy, but comparatively, she kills him in how much comparatively she's given away. And especially people like Jeff Bezos. I mean, in terms of percentage wise, she definitely takes the cake.
And they're like relevant to what she was influenced by growing up. I mean, she gives to orphanages and these institutions that promote Black culture and education and church community, like things that helped her grow into the person that she ended up being. She tried to give back to those same groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And she really is, I think, a good marker of the idea. I mean, she just immediately took everything she had, all of her gained, I'm not even going to call it privilege, but like gained privilege and gained ability and used it to help the community from which she came.
Yeah, she came from nothing, built herself into something, and then just gave it all back.
Yeah. After her death, she was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, New York City. At the time of her death, she was the wealthiest African-American woman in America, with a net worth estimated between $500,000 and $1 million. And this included her Villa Lawaro, her property in Indianapolis and Pittsburgh, and other cities. The previously mentioned Villa Lawaro, which is now privately owned, was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1979, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation has designated the property a national treasure. Her headquarters, the Walker Manufacturing Company headquarters in Indianapolis, was renamed the Madam Walker Theater Center and is also listed on the register a year later in 1980. She's featured several times in, pop culture and different artistic works. In 2006, playwright Regina Taylor wrote The Dreams of Sarah Breedlove, which recounts the struggles and success of Walker's life. And as a kind of continuation of her company, in 2016, Sundial Brands actually launched a line in collaboration with Sephora titled Madam C.J. Walker Beauty Culture, which focuses on the use of natural ingredients to care for different types of hair.
Are they very similar products to what she actually sold?
I have no idea. I don't imagine so. I venture to guess. Again, no, I'm not a hair expert, but I venture to guess that at this point in time, there's probably more sophisticated technology for hair growth and for hair care than
We should have
originally
had,
sold.
My sister-in-law Bianca on this episode to give us the
That would have been,
expert
she would have
in
been a
hair
great,
perspective.
yeah. Oh my gosh, that would have been great. There is actually a book written about her by her great-great-granddaughter, Alelia Bundles, named after her daughter,
Yeah.
which was published in 2001. It's titled On Her Own Ground, The Life and Times of Madam C.J. Walker. And the book can, of course, be found on Amazon, but before you head there, we figured it would be better in the legacy and memory of C.J. Walker for you to find a Black-owned bookstore, independent bookstore to buy it from. And if you need help finding one, we encourage you to check out Elizabeth's Bookshop and Writing Center first. It's located right here in Akron, Ohio, and it's a local Black-owned bookstore whose focus is to amplify marginalized voices. I should note they do not have a brick and mortar. It is online only, so don't go to Akron and look for it on the street.
But since probably the majority of our listeners are not from Akron, go find it online.
Yep. Yes. And the cool thing about it is a portion of bookshop.org. So she uses this website called bookshop.org. and a portion of their sales help support other local independent bookstores. And then a percentages of her sales individually go to helping what's called the Loveland Foundation in their mission to make mental health care accessible for Black women and girls. So we're going all the way for CJ Walker. I think this would be something she would be, super into supporting. So if you'd like to purchase this book and read more about her, the URL for Elizabeth's bookshop is bookshop.org/shop/Elizabeth's. And that's Elizabeth's with an S.
And of course, this is a free ad. We are not influenced at all by this Elizabeth's bookshop or anywhere that you might buy this book. But I think in the spirit of Madam C.J. Walker, we love to support local businesses, and especially ones that are doing
Absolutely.
good with their business, helping other people. So if you own a local business, feel free to write to us. We're happy to give you a little shout out.
Yeah. And if reading isn't quite your thing, as we've mentioned multiple times, there is a new series on Netflix. It's a 4-part limited series titled Self-Made, starring Octavia Spencer and Tiffany Haddish. And it's great. I finished it just a couple hours before we recorded this. And while like I said, the writers took a lot of creative license in creating drama and tension for TV. So it's not purely autobiographical, or biographical, I should say. It does a really good job of portraying her tenacity and her work ethic. And it's just good television.
We don't need to give free ads to Netflix, though.
No.
They have enough
Wait till
money.
it's not going to go off Netflix, so I can't say wait till it's off Netflix. But that's it for today. All we've got left is the quiz, which I'm looking forward to. I'm excited to see what you've got.
Oh, we'll see. Hopefully they're good. You kind of touched on a few of them, so I might have to come up with some new questions while we're in our little break here. But I'll try to come up with something for you.
All right. We'll be right back.
Science is the tool we can use to explain everything in our world. But sometimes the information's delivered in a way that's hard to understand, misleading, or fake. Join me at the Science Night podcast as I talk with different scientists about their work. In a fun way. Find it wherever you get your podcasts or at scinight.com.
Now it's time for today's quiz section. We like to end every episode with a short 3-question quiz to kind of test today's host to see how much he studied about his topic and give you, the listener, a chance to see how much you know, see if you know any of these as you're following along. Maybe you know ahead of time, maybe you picked it up from watching the Netflix series about this topic, even though that you said that wasn't particularly accurate.
I mean, it definitely had its flaws.
So I don't know if you will get these or not. I don't think they're terribly difficult, but since you did so much research on Madam C.J. Walker, I don't think they'll be too terrible.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest, I had a hard time finding questions to ask you that were like relevant to the topic that you didn't already cover.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like a historical event, really. It's biographical, so.
There's not so much around her that isn't specifically about her.
Right.
So your first question is going to be a little more of a challenge, I guess. The other two will be more about the specific story. So we'll start with the hard one. Question number 1. We spent all this time talking about Madam C.J. Walker as the first Black female millionaire in America. Do you know the first Black male millionaire in America?
Oh my God. I feel like I read this, and I don't know the last name, and the first name's probably wildly incorrect, but I'm going to guess the name Aaron is sticking out to me for some reason. That's all I got.
I don't know where you got Aaron
Dang.
from.
Okay.
This isn't someone that I would have known if I hadn't just looked it up, but A man named Jeremiah Hamilton, who was a Wall Street broker and amassed a net worth of $200 million by the time he died in 1875.
Wow.
So he was a little earlier than Madam C.J. Walker. Not quite the, well, I guess I don't really know his backstory too much, but not quite the rags to riches story. I would assume if he was a Wall Street broker.
Yeah.
But first black male millionaire in America, Jeremiah Hamilton. Your second question, we talked a lot about Madam C.J. Walker's business and her products. Are you able to name the 3 main ingredients in Madam C.J. Walker's famous shampoo?
Oh, in her shampoo? I don't even know what soap was made out of. I'm going to go with citrus oil. I'm sticking with that. Petroleum jelly. Don't know why. Because this is more about the hair grower than anything else. Citrus oil, petroleum jelly, and I feel like water's probably one.
I'm sure that some of those may have been in it. I think you were on the right track with the first one. But
Really?
The article that I found said that the main ingredients in her famous shampoo were olive oil, coconut oil, and lye.
Okay.
I think lye is the soap ingredient that you were looking for
I
there.
kept trying to think of what it was, but I couldn't. Okay, olive oil, coconut oil, and lye. I could see that. I'm going to try to make that for myself.
Let me know how it turns out.
I've actually heard that olive oil is supposed to be good for hair. I'm going to be honest, I tried putting it in my hair once instead of pomade just to see what it did, and it's enormously oily. Surprise. It's a mess.
You are much more of a hair product guy than I am. That was great for a podcast where no one can see you.
I do that all the
Matt
time.
Just did this beautiful little hair flip thing.
I take pride in my hair.
I don't like having stuff in my hair, and I think if Bianca is listening to this, she will yell at me for saying that because sometimes Rita yells at me for it. But I just don't like touching my head and feeling gunk in it.
I'll totally agree with that. I mean, I don't generally tend towards products that leave, especially not like a hard coating, but even ones that like when I use them leave like an oily film. I don't like them. Like everything I use to a degree where I can brush it and like push it out until it basically feels natural.
Do you wash your hair every day?
Oh no. That's
Really?
That's how I get, like, I mean, honestly, once I got longer hair, I stopped. I used to all the time, but my hair was so dry because I did that once I started to grow longer hair, it was so frizzy. I probably wash my hair twice a week.
I mean,
If I'm being
I wash
honest,
my hair
like
every day.
COVID times, we're looking at once a week.
I wash my hair every day. I know Rita doesn't, but I mean, she's a girl. She has long hair. I feel weird and gross if I don't. I have nice hair though. My hair is
I
really
think your hair
thick.
looks fine.
Thank you.
You're a handsome man, Phil.
This is the content people come to our podcast for, to listen to two guys who know nothing about hair
Discuss
talking
their
about
hair. I probably didn't help my my chances for that date you called for when I said I'd wash my hair twice a week at best.
You look great. A little dirty sometimes, but always great. We should move on to your last question, huh?
Yeah, please.
All right. Question number 3 is about Lelia Walker. Upon moving to Harlem, what was Lelia well known for other than just expanding her mother's business?
Oh, gosh. I mean, this is going to be entirely...
This is more of a social thing than a career thing, if that helps.
I mean, this is going to be entirely based on... I don't even want to base it on that because I'm pretty sure I was going to say it's going to be based on the show, but I read that this part of the show isn't correct. Because in the show, she's portrayed as, at the beginning, closeted lesbian and then comes out to her mother towards the end of the series. I don't know that that's historically correct. So I'm going to say... Socially. I mean, I feel like it's kind of a cop-out to just say going out, but I'll go with a more specific answer, I guess. And I'll say singing.
You're more on the right path when you started. So she was known for throwing these lavish, extravagant parties at her home in Irvington and at her Manhattan salon. But it was, I guess, questioned that she may have been queer or lesbian.
Okay.
She was also married 3 times like her mother, all to men. So
Yeah.
I don't believe that she was ever actually out, but there was a lot of suspicion and questioning about her sexuality. But I believe this was written from her, it would have been, Madam C.J. Walker's great-great-granddaughter that you mentioned,
Yeah.
Alelia Bundles. I believe that's where this quote comes from, her writing, that says that these parties provided a safe, welcoming environment for queer people at a time when there were few other social options available. While she herself was not known to be lesbian or bisexual, Walker's parties were places where anyone could express their sexuality however they pleased.
Interesting.
So at the very least, she was an ally, I guess.
I like it.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting about her daughter, not about Madam C.J. Walker,
Right.
but about Lilia, her daughter.
Yeah, the whole I don't want to give anything away for people who are going to go watch it, but the whole scene where she goes to Harlem and, sees the culture there is pretty cool in the show. That's
I've
interesting.
never been to Harlem. Have you?
No. I've probably been in it just walking through, like in New York, but I don't know that I haven't been to anywhere notable in Harlem. Like I didn't go to Harlem to see Harlem.
Yeah. Not that it's in any way the same thing, but I mean, obviously having an interest in sports, I've done some reading up on like the Harlem Globetrotters, and they are actually originally from Chicago.
Oh, really?
And yeah, they started, I mean, they basically weren't, when they started, they weren't doing all these weird, crazy stunts and showcasing their crazy skills and stuff. They just traveled city to city playing against all the colleges and the local professional teams and stuff,
Yeah.
to show off how good black athletes were. Did we talk about this on the baseball episode?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Black baseball player episode. We might have. I don't know. But because they became such a notable part of black culture, they rebranded themselves as the Harlem Globetrotters to show that they were, to at least say that they were from basically the center of black culture in Harlem.
Interesting.
Yeah. Not really related, I guess, to Madam C.J.
No,
Walker,
but that's a cool
sort
tidbit.
of in that same vein. Yeah. Well, that's probably enough of this episode, right? Gone on a few digressions here during our quiz segment.
That's okay. I feel like the digressions are as good as the...
Yeah. End of the episode. It's allowed.
If you'd like any hairstyling tips from me or Phil, please write to us at historiesbside@gmail.com.
And I will direct you to my sister-in-law, Bianca, and her salon.
As always, thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate the support, and we'll see you next week. History's B-Side is an independent, listener-supported podcast.
Leave us a review or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting service. And follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at History's B-Side.
Send us your feedback or inquire about sponsorship and advertising opportunities by emailing us at historiesbside@gmail.com.
You can donate to the show at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside. While you're there, check out our membership perks, merchandise, and more.
This episode was researched and produced by your hosts, Matt Melito
And Phil Hall. Thanks for listening to History's B-Side.